I think I'm going to go to a McDonald's next week someplace. I'm going to go, might not be in your place. I'm going to go to a McDonald's, and I'm going to work the French fry job for about a half an hour. I want to see how it is.
Welcome, Left Reckoners. David Griscom here, joined as always by Matt Leck. Brother, how you doing?
I'm doing good, David. Good to be with you on Left Reckoning 187.
Yeah, I mean, we got a full slate in front of us. We're about to be joined by our good friend Derek Davison of American Prestige to talk about what's going on in Israel, in Gaza, and in Lebanon. Pretty worrying stuff, if I do say so myself. But as always, it's great to have our good friends from that program on the show to help us make sense of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, horrible stuff. And that same issue rearing its head domestically, Rashida Tlaib, who I think we both agree, maybe the best representative in Congress, I think by decent margin. I'd put Ilhan up there, maybe some other folks. But Rashida Tlaib, well, let's start at the beginning here, shall we? So about a week ago, last week, there was this page attack that we talk about with Derek Davison in the upcoming interview. And a cartoonist from, can't remember his name here, H. Payne, tweeted this out, or posted this, that says, my pager just exploded, and it's Representative Tlaib at her desk. I mean, very... clearly insinuating she's a Hezbollah militant, I think is what Israel's calling everybody who got hit by those booby-trapped communications devices. I mean, a Nazi-esque type of cartoon, I think. And so this got it got Rashida Tlaib a lot of sympathy. A lot of people coming out and saying, this has no place here, how could you? And then the Attorney General Dana Nessel of the great state of Michigan tweeted out this, because you can't have her getting too much sympathy. Rashida's religion should not be used in a cartoon to imply that she's a terrorist. It's Islamophobic and wrong. Just as Rashida should not use my religion to imply I cannot perform my job fairly as Attorney General. It's anti-Semitic and wrong. Now, this was a bit of news to everyone because nobody was aware that Rashida Tlaib had made such a horrible anti-Semitic accusation that because she's Jewish, she can't be impartial.
And we're going to get to debunking this in a second, Matt, but like here's a little advice to people who want to slander Rashida Tlaib. You can't just make up quotes about something like that, because if Rashida Tlaib had said anything remotely in the ballpark of that, it would be plastered wall-to-wall news. So what we end up getting, and we'll get into sort of debunking this, getting into where it came from, is this slow insinuation of just repeating it in multiple different places that she had said this, responding to a non-existent quote, a non-existent statement, in order to try and smear her. But just truly, one, despicable, and also pretty wrong-headed if you're trying to get at her. Because this is somebody whose every move, every statement, every appearance, is she making the right face when somebody's speaking about whatnot, is scrutinized.
Yeah, I remember about a year ago, not quite a year ago, I guess, but when everyone was aghast that she had the temerity to accuse Israel of bombing a hospital. Oh, yeah. And now look what's happened since then. David Packman, have you noticed what's happened since then?
I was wondering. I wonder if he's come out with that response.
No, of course not. He'll be under that rock forever. Here's Rashida, or not. Here is Gretchen Whitmer, governor, who a lot of progressives champion, with Jake Tapper, who is a massive Zionist liar for CNN. Here is Tapper doubling down on this narrative.
But do you think Attorney General Nessel is not doing her job? Because Congresswoman Tlaib is suggesting that she shouldn't be prosecuting these individuals that Nessel says broke the law, and that she's only doing it because she's Jewish and the protesters are not. That's quite quite an accusation. Do you think it's true?
So I'm sorry, that's not the accusation. It's not true that that's the accusation. It's not true that Rashida Tlaib even said that actually the protesters aren't Jewish, because I don't think Rashida Tlaib would say something that's so obviously untrue. There are Jewish students all over these protests, I mean, disproportionately so, concerned with Israel. So, I mean, just a lie to set up Whitmer.
Like I said, Jake, I'm not going to get in the middle of this argument that they're having. I can just say this. You know, we do want to make sure that students are safe on our campuses, and we recognize that every person has the right to make their statement about how they feel about an issue, a right to speak out. And I'm going to use every lever of mine to ensure that both are true.
So you know, just to be noted, because we're going to give everyone an update on Whitmer here. I mean, you know, not a strong statement, but very much trying to sidestep this, right? Because Tapper is very clearly Tapper. By the way, you know, I think most of our audience is fairly media literate, knows who Jake Tapper is. Jake Tapper is somebody who regularly is trying, especially on this issue, is trying to insert himself within the story, insert his positions and his hopes and dreams and fantasies onto any kind of conversation about Zionism and about genocide in Gaza. Right. So this is Tapper very much trying to bully and pressure Whitmer into saying, into condemning Rashida Tlaib on his program, which Whitmer didn't do, but she didn't hold out for too long.
No, and before we get to that, people remember, I mean, Jake Tapper has a long career. This isn't the first instance, but 2018, Jake Tapper asked Representative Keith Ellison for his reaction to the Supreme Court's travel ban ruling and how it relates to Ellison's ties to Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam. So that's, Jake Tapper is this, he's really a despicable guy. As well, Will Menaker said on Twitter, he's the #1 op in media. I'd co-sign that. Dana Bash, not far off, was also at CNN. But yes, Whitmer then comes out, and while she said she didn't want to put herself in the middle of it, she absolutely has. She's failed completely to avoid the issue. And what does she say here? She says, I should have it somewhere.
I have it here if you want. I can put it up for everybody.
Yeah.
This is from the horse's mouth himself, Jake Tapper, who tweeted out just a little while ago the suggestion that Attorney General Nessel would make charging decisions based on her religion as opposed to the rule of law as anti-Semitic. Attorney General Nessel has always conducted her work with integrity and followed the rule of law. We must all use our platform and voices to call out hateful rhetoric and racist tropes.
Yeah, and so let's get to the actual fact check here and what was and how this happened. So Detroit Metro News has an article out on this right now. Fact check, Tlaib did not say Nessel charged pro-Palestine protesters because she's Jewish. The blatant and hateful false claims were peddled by a state lawmaker, the attorney general, and some media outlets. And this is the story, okay? This is the story that there has been a contrived 100% controversy over this by a attorney general for one of our states, Michigan, and the CNN, and a bunch, and also the ADL, throw them in there too. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, a Democratic state lawmaker, and some news agencies are falsely claiming that Tlaib said Nessel's office only filed charges against pro-Palestinian activists at the University of Michigan because she's Jewish. The spurious claims stem from an interview that Tlaib did with Metro Times on September 13th. Tlaib, who was born in Detroit to Palestinian immigrants and is the only Palestinian American member in Congress, argued that the changes were an unjust and heavy-handed response to peaceful civil disobedience. Now, that is true. When Gretchen Whitmer says that we need to make sure everyone can make their statements and their voice or whatever, that is until cops say actually doing that is trespassing and here's a fucking felony for you, which is what Dana Nessel has followed through charging these people with. And that decision is one that other attorney general said, we're not going to do this. We're actually going to drop these charges because of free speech. Nessel didn't. Tlaib pointed out that Nessel, who has been in office since January 19th, has not filed charges against protesters opposed to racism, police brutality. And let's get to the relevant bits here. Tlaib never once mentioned Nessel's religion or Judaism, but Metro Times pointed out in the story that Nessel is Jewish, and that appears to be the spark that led to the false claims. It should also be noted that the ACLU of Michigan criticized Nessel for charging peaceful protesters. So that's the thing that we don't want to talk about, is that this Attorney General is suppressing protesters. We're talking about the reaction to that.
I'm just saying, here at the University of Texas, students face severe brutality from the police. 79 people, were arrested and had those charges against them dropped because it was very clear infringement on their human and civil rights. So, just noting the caliber with which this person is sort of operating. Sorry, like how they're throwing the book at these folks.
Yeah, exactly. And that we just can't. And the problem here is that's not a good story for Jake Tapper to talk about. No. Okay, that's not the agenda that Jake Tapper's following.
Well, but I mean, this is an anchor of a major American cable news program baselessly slandering a sitting member of Congress to promote his political values and his political position, right? Somebody who portrays himself as a neutral arbiter, somebody who's going to look at the facts. I mean, CNN loves to do this kind of thing with Trump, for example. It's like Trump told 39 lies during the debate or whatnot, right? Here is sitting anchor of a major American program coming up whole cloth with accusations against Rashida Tlaib that she said that Nessel is coming after these people because she's Jewish. Completely absurd, right? I mean, egregious propaganda. Yeah.
And how can this change? Chris Hayes noticed this. Chris Hayes has a big platform. He posts this, the fact check of Steve Neevely, and Tlaib did not say Nessel charged pro-Palestinian protesters because she's Jewish. Chris Hayes, this is the reporter who conducted the interview that produced the quote that has been the source of the controversy. Now, I got to quibble with that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The source of the controversy is lying Zionists that are making stuff up to distract from what's actually happening. That's the source of the controversy.
Because what's the quote?
Exactly.
There's no quote. They never have a quote. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
The quote was just that with our sort of conventions of journalism, we mention, just as he mentioned the Palestine background of Tlaib, mentioned the Jewish background of the AG in the paragraph preceding the actual quote, which was factual about this attorney general coming down hard on those protesters. Mm-hmm. And why are these protesters come down hard against? We know why. It's because of what they are protesting. If they were protesting Ron DeSantis, book ban, or those militias that want to get Whitmer, according to the FBI, then we would champion those people. Go for good job, but it's not that. That's not. Those people don't have a lobby that has any sway with Democrats.
This is just the actions of major members of the Democratic Party, and here particularly the Michigan Democratic Party. When, let's not forget the context here, by the way, how we started this segment, where somebody who is facing racist abuse from the media. I mean, just you put that cartoon in context with older racist cartoons that you would see in American newspapers, it would fit right in, right? Apart from some of the news story would displace it, but everything about it. Extremely disgusting, and the most simple thing for any member of a political party that's supposed to stand up for civil rights, civil liberties, all these things, to condemn, right? Hell, this is even maybe an opportunity for people who are rabid genocide supporters to say, hey, this is this is inappropriate. Let's not do this kind of thing. But no, instead you have members, leaders of the Democratic Party attacking a member of their own political party going into an election. I mean, just truly no discipline within this organization. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because there is a discipline. There's a discipline to one side, but that side happens to be Zionism, not particularly American interests or the interests of human rights.
Yeah, I mean, the fascism is coming from inside the house, and it's doing a genocide all over your campaign for the 2024 White House, guys. And there's a lot of tolerance for that, and it's kind of shocking to me.
Yeah, it is truly disgusting. Complete solidarity with Rashida Tlaib, and nothing but shame for these folks who are either willingly or so easily bamboozled into supporting these anti-human projects here.
Or, as in Whitmer's case, I think just lack of courage, just a plain lack of courage. And you see where that ends up.
I mean, and also for fucking what, man? I'm sorry, like to give Jake Tapper like a little tickle on Monday afternoon. You know what I mean? It's just like small potatoes at the end of the day too, for that kind of move that makes the cowardliness even more, the cowardice even more despicable in some ways.
Yeah, we need to see more pressure from, like, it's interesting. Ta-Nehisi Coates has this new piece out condemning editors and the press that's really pissing off a lot of people. There needs to be a lot. It's frankly too delayed. There needs to be a lot more of this reckoning. It's been too long coming. It needs to happen now.
I mean, that's what I was going to, I know we're going to talk a lot more about this today in this episode, and why not? This important stuff. The fact of the matter is, anybody who's been working in politics or media for a while has been fed up with this, probably privately, for a while. And maybe they've been extremely cowardly to not have said something before. But you are seeing a little bit of a dam breaking, because anyone who has any kind of sensibility, interest in like history and getting things right, has certainly been frustrated, if you work in media in this country, about the tiptoeing that goes on around the genocidal project in the Middle East, and that's Israel. It's very good to see Coates come out, and hopefully you see more folks come out and speak the truth on this issue, because it's one of those things, and of course this is anecdotal, but I lived in DC for a while. I used to work in politics in DC, and the conversations that you would have with a glass of wine in your hand about this issue with people would be very different from the one people would be having publicly, because everybody knows, because there's no real way to get around it. You just make a decision that this is a part of like your career, your politics, or whatever. The American project is an unfortunate casualty of it. And I think it's becoming unsustainable for folks, thankfully, because so many people in America have come out and said, not in our name, right? So many people in this country have shown that there's not an appetite for this, right? For so long, the media class and the political class, I think, when it comes to Israel-Palestine, has sort of relied on this image of Americans as kind of ignorant and hate-filled people, that they can say, oh, you know what? We might feel differently, but we're enlightened and the rest of this country isn't. The fact of the matter is it's the American people who are enlightened on this issue and continue to become more and more enlightened the more that they learn about it. And then it's the political and the media class that are actually the Neanderthals dragging their knuckles around on the dirt.
Yeah, subscribing to just complete myths that everyone can see through.
Yeah. Well, should we get our boy on? We're about to be joined by our good friend Derek Davison, foreign exchanges and American prestige. We'll be talking about Lebanon, Gaza, and Israel. You're going to want to stick around for that conversation, and stick around for the post game right after that, where Matt and I are going to be hanging out, telling some stories, and hearing from all of y'all. So patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to that. And let's talk to Derek.
Sorry, real quick. Subscribe to our Patreon also. Patreon.com/leftreckoning. I think we're going to get into Frederick Jameson for which... Yeah, I'm glad, David. I'll need you there. I've read postmodernism, but it might need to refresh myself a little bit on that stuff. But I am excited to talk with Russ and one of his colleagues on that.
Yeah, very excited for that. They'll be up this weekend, and rest in peace to Frederick Jameson. I mean, somebody who was a very, very large influence on many people in the U.S. and across the globe. So. Really looking forward to having that conversation as well. So don't forget to, subscribe, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to that.
Peace. Welcome back, Left Reckoners, with me, David Griscom. Hello, David.
How's it going, brother?
It's going well. And joining us once again, Derek Davison of the FX Exchanges newsletter and American Prestige podcast. Derek, thank you for joining us once again.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
So we had you on last, I believe, November to talk about Israel's response to October 7th. Unfortunately, does kind of maybe our worst sort of forebodings have basically come true since then. And so, actually, let's talk about that. I'm just curious, just to reflect before we get into the Lebanon escalation through de-escalation or de-escalation through escalation. Like, this is pretty much the worst case scenario that when people saw October 7th happen.
I mean, I hesitate to say that because it could always get worse, right? I mean, there could be, we may be seeing, based on some of the reporting that's come out of Israel, we may be seeing the start of full-blown ethnic cleansing, at least in northern Gaza. I think things have gotten worse in the West Bank, but they maybe haven't gotten as bad as they could have gotten. That said, I mean, it's hard to know how much more destruction the Israelis could be wreaking across the region right now. I mean, the IDF is certainly well armed and cared for by the U.S., but its capacities are not limitless. So yeah, I mean, it's close to. I would hesitate to say it's the absolute worst case scenario, but I think it's certainly within striking distance.
Right. And so we have a few quotes today. One from Joe Biden, the more recent one, saying "fucking do it" or something like that.
Just fucking get it done. Yeah, he said a cuss word, so you know he means it.
And wait till they translate that to Hebrew, and all of Israel is like, "Oh, we prompted the guy who famously swears to swear."
Yeah.
And then this de-escalation, talk about this. This is one of the quotes, kind of along the lines of, we need to destroy the village to save it, from Vietnam. This new quote, we're going to de-escalate through escalation. And apparently the U.S. officials buy this.
Yeah, this is the kind of crazy talk that is normally limited to discussions of nuclear war. And I mean that literally. Like, de-escalation through escalation is a term that I've seen most often in discussions of how to win a nuclear exchange. And it's the idea that you can use a nuke, not an ICBM, strategic nuke, but a low yield tactical, so-called tactical nuclear device in a conflict and end the conflict without tipping over into World War III. It has been a thing that's regularly talked about among, sort of think tankers on the lunatic side of the DC establishment. It's the idea that's behind what's been a push in recent years to get back to the idea of tactical nuclear weapons. For a long time, nukes, at least the discussion about nukes in this country, has been mostly confined to the strategic triad, to the bombers, the ICBMs, the submarines. But this notion of going back to things that could be put into battlefield artillery or just lower yield, that's the term of art. We don't talk about tactical nukes anymore. We're talking about low yield nukes. And the idea being that you could set off one of these things, and if you did it the right way at the right time, against the right enemy, the enemy would say, okay, well, we didn't know you were that serious, and would back off. But it's the same logic, basically, that Israel can push the envelope again and again and again, and eventually Hezbollah will just sort of collapse and say, okay, yeah, we didn't know that you guys were this serious. We'll back down. What they're after is, first of all, for Hezbollah to stand down, stop, launching rockets and other projectiles, drones into northern Israel, absent any change in the situation in Gaza, because this is, the talk that is, has gone on here is you've got the Biden administration saying they hope that they're worried about escalation, but they hope that what the Israelis are doing will convince Hezbollah to make a deal. Well, Hezbollah's already offered a deal. It's end the slaughter in Gaza, end the genocide, and we will stop. But that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable to the Israelis. The U.S. supposedly behind the scenes has been having these conversations with Israeli officials. Like, if you end the situation, if you end what you're doing in Gaza, then Hezbollah will back down. And they're not interested in stopping what they're doing in Gaza. So that can't work. That logic can't work for the U.S. and for Israel. So the idea is to get Hezbollah to break with Hamas, break with the axis of resistance, which serves strategic aims for Israel in addition to, ending the tension or ending the situation that's caused so many Israelis and so many Lebanese civilians to have to evacuate the border area on both sides. So that's the goal, is to get Hezbollah to break with Hamas and stand down independent of what's happening in Gaza. And then beyond that, to get Hezbollah to withdraw to the, I forget the exact, I think it might be 20 kilometers off of the border, which was supposedly part of an arrangement that ended, I think, the 2006 war. But that's a longer term thing. Right now, the short term consideration is to get this break with Hamas and to get them to declare that they're standing down.
I mean, who is like the audience for this kind of rationale? I mean, is this something that I know it's hard to like assign motivation and understanding what Israel is doing can sometimes sort of stretch the imagination. But I mean, truly, like who is the audience for this kind of position here?
Yeah, I mean, partly I think it's DC think tanker types who love this kind of Byzantine bullshit because it sounds sophisticated, but really it amounts to we're going to do nothing and hope for the best. But you can't say that, so you say it in this more sophisticated way. In that sense, I think it's also meant for a political audience, right? For people who are watching this who might be wondering whether I should vote for Kamala Harris and continue the Biden administration in another form, or whether I should be looking in another direction. People who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 under the presumption that he was a steady hand on the rudder and a foreign policy super genius, which is what we get told all over and over again. And he has been, completely exposed as a foreign policy dolt over the last 10 or 11 months, almost a full year now. So, it's for them because it's a rationale again for the Biden administration to do nothing, because there's nothing it can do unless it's prepared to wield even an ounce of leverage against the Israelis, which it's not. So it's a justification for not doing anything, for just sitting idly by and watching this happen, while saying, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want a war. Trust us. Don't abandon us. We still, we're really sad about all this. We're upset about it. And here's the strategy, which is de-escalation through escalation, or in other words, we don't know what the fuck we're doing, but we can't say that.
Right. Like, what does he conceivably mean by this is the quote, keep fucking trying? Like, try what exactly?
Try what? I mean, this is I had this flash of imagining being one of the people he said that to, and like, because he said it in a meeting of like national security staff, I guess. And I don't know how these people, I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are fully on board with this because they're, steeped in DC, Israel mythos. But if there's anybody left who hasn't already quit, who recognizes what a fucking disaster this policy has been since October, how they didn't just like lose their mind, like have to be dragged out of the fucking White House, because the response to that should be, what the fuck do you want us to try with? You've given us nothing. You haven't allowed us to use any of the leverage that the United States has over Israel to force Benjamin Netanyahu into a deal. You've got Israeli media outlets talking about Netanyahu being the sole obstacle, or at least the single greatest obstacle to a ceasefire in Gaza, which is something that the Biden administration cannot bring itself to admit. And you don't see it in U.S. media either. but it's being reported over there. It's being reported in Israeli media. There's outlets doing investigative pieces on this, like breaking down everything that's happened over the last 6 months and the number of times he's introduced some new bullshit requirement or red line, or just stop talking, or done some provocative attack in Gaza and killed dozens of people to undermine peace talks because they seem, or ceasefire talks because they seem like they were making progress. And through it all, Joe Biden has not lifted a finger or budged an inch on the idea of actually leveraging some of the considerable might of the United States in this particular case, dealing with a client state that is dependent on U.S. support. I just, even now, as they're escalating into war, I mean, I would say it's already a war. We can't say that because it would mean acknowledging that Israel's been the aggressor, and it's a undeclared war against Lebanon. But even now, as this is happening, and this is supposedly, you talk about worst case scenarios for the administration politically heading into an election. War with Hezbollah was supposed to be one of the worst case scenarios, absolutely avoid at all costs. He's going to watch it happen instead of just calling up Benjamin Netanyahu and saying, look, if you want to push this and you want to keep doing, more and more provocative, more intense airstrikes, killing more and more people, that's fine. But if you overshoot the mark and there's suddenly a regional war, we are not going to be there to back you up. Like, we're not going to be there to save you from the consequences of your own actions. And just see what Netanyahu would do in that situation. Instead, we're told already today there are more U.S. soldiers, more U.S. military assets going to the Middle East, again, to shield the Israeli government from the consequences of its own actions.
So really, just really quick, because I think we got to get into what's this escalation here. But Derek, I hear it said from some folks out there. I don't know if I would necessarily consider them to be the most persuasive arguments I've ever heard, but that the United States' hands are sort of tied. That they actually don't have as much influence over Israel as some folks might say. And that, some of this kind of stuff that we're seeing from this theater we're seeing from the Biden administration is actually just sort of hiding that fact that the United States doesn't actually have a tremendous amount of Israel over Israel. Could you just sort of speak to that and then talk about like the ways that the United States could actually put some pressure on Israel? I mean, what specifically could the United States be doing to put some more pressure on that state?
I mean, where are the weapons coming from? Where's all the ordnance that they're dropping on Gaza coming from? Where's their ability to withstand not just, obliterating Gaza, but then to turn around and be able to wage a war against Hezbollah, which is far more capable and militarily advanced than Hamas. It's not, at the level of the Israeli military, but it's certainly closer than Hamas. And they're ready to pivot from one to the other after, 11 plus months of expending everything they have in Gaza. They're ready to pivot to Hezbollah. Why? Where are they getting the weapons from? Where are they getting the support? Where are they getting the training, the intelligence, the surveillance? It all comes from the U.S. Now, could they go somewhere else? I guess, but not on a time frame that would make any difference in this conflict. If the U.S. were to say, that's it, we're done, we're washing our hands of this, could they go to China or Russia? I mean, maybe on a long enough time scale, although I'm not sure either of those governments would be interested. But it's just asinine. You've got Israeli generals over and over again who have said we couldn't do this without the U.S. We couldn't keep up this pace, the tempo of operations. And yes, Israel does have its own arms manufacturing, domestic arms manufacturing capacity, but not at this level, not at the level that would be required to sustain again the intensity of what's happened in Gaza, and then still feel confident that they could fight. With what should be a depleted military, fight a war against Hezbollah and potentially, Iran, Iraqi militias, the Houthis, all across the region, to feel ready for that. So that would be the first thing, is where the weapon's coming from. And secondly, if the United States isn't required here to protect Israel, if there's no leverage in the form of U.S., what the U.S. Does for the Israelis, then why are we sending more assets to the region? Why do we park 2 aircraft carriers in the region after the last time things got heated? It was entirely to protect Israel, because there's a fear that Israel wouldn't on its own be able to do all those things all at once. So, I guess my response would be, if there's no leverage, which means the weapons don't matter, the military support doesn't matter, then why do it? Why give them the weapons? Why why expend the money and the resources to put all that materiel in the region? Just let them go, do what they want. Then, we have no leverage, But why, if we don't have leverage, are we still doing this then? Are we still being dog walked by Benjamin Netanyahu and letting him drive the car? Because, what's the upside for that?
Yeah, and as David said, Lebanon, there's these explosive booby traps in communication devices within Lebanon. It doesn't quite seem like Kamala Harris and maybe the Biden administration are going to do anything to restrain that. Now, I remember when Kamala first became the nominee saying things like, there's too many deaths. We're seeing too many deaths in Palestine, but we will defend Israel from Iranian aggression. And that seemed to me like, well, kind of preparing for what we're about to see, which is this escalation. It doesn't lead to a de-escalation. It leads to a lot of ruins and dead people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same garbage that you get from good Team Blue Democrats and liberals on this kind of thing every time there's a crisis like this, which is, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to change policy. We're not going to do anything that might risk alienating the people we already have. I mean, we are alienating Arab populations in the United States, certainly, but what's done is done in a sense. I think their fear is that if they change anything, this coalition that they feel like they built is going to collapse for whatever reason, even though polling suggests it would not. But it's the same, it's the same brand of empty liberalism kind of, our job isn't to actually stop the atrocity or to stop enabling the atrocity. It's to continue enabling it, but kind of, make a sad face and wring our hands and say, gosh, isn't that bad?
Hear you and see you,
Yeah, we hear you, we see you, we bear witness to the suffering that we're helping to cause. But there's just nothing we can do about it.
So I mean, just like sort of keep everybody abreast. Could we, fill people in on the past few days? Let's start with this, with this pager attack, and specifically like who was targeted, and also just for people who may not be as familiar with this, fill folks in about like whether or not these are like military targets, right? That are being hit. If you could even know, for example, if you are blowing up pagers all across an area, if you're just only hitting civilian targets.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is we don't know, and the running theme through everything that's happened in the last week or so is that we have to sort of take the Israelis' word for it. What they claim to have done is to have, through a dummy corporation, manufactured a shipment of pagers and two-way radios known to be used by Hezbollah, and they waited for Hezbollah to place its order, and they sent these devices, instead of actual pager. I mean, I guess they must have worked for some period of time, but they were laced with explosives, and they were sort of sitting there waiting for the Israelis to activate the explosives inside these devices. Theoretically, this is the kind of thing that you would use after, in this scenario and what's been going on for the last several months, after you had managed to provoke Hezbollah into doing something that could be justifiably considered the opening shot of a war. Then you blow these things up. It takes out a lot of their communications network. You presumably killed a number of their operatives or injured them severely. And it's sort of an opening salvo for the Israelis. But what happened was, ostensibly at least, the Hezbollah found out about the sabotage. Somebody in Hezbollah found out. The Israelis got wind that they had found out and decided to just blow them up rather than risk Hezbollah going through these things and inspecting them, and they would lose the weapon. Again, I say we're taking the Israelis' word for it. We're taking their word that these pagers all went to Hezbollah, that there was nobody else in Lebanon ordering the same brand of pager at the same time, whose orders might have gone on the same consignment, which could be medical personnel. It could be, I mean, I don't know who still uses pagers, but there are still fields where these things are used, and two-way radios as well. We're taking the Israelis' word for it that there were no collateral. There's no collateral damage in that regard. We know there was collateral damage and bystanders were hurt when these things went off, because of course when you send the go code to these devices to blow up, you have no idea where people are. You have no idea whether somebody's in a crowded space or surrounded by civilians. You have no idea if they're in a car, on a plane, wherever somebody could be where these things could cause catastrophic harm. The impact doesn't appear to have been worst case scenario, but we know at least a couple of kids were killed. And the response to that has been, well, I guess they shouldn't have had Hezbollah parent. I mean, basically just like this, psychotic, rationale for why it's okay for children to be killed in this circumstance. So yeah, I mean, it's taking a lot of things on faith that the Israelis were very careful and targeted in what they did, and we don't know. We just don't know how much thought went into it, or how much how much care was taken to make sure that only the targeted Hezbollah personnel were caught up in this. And you also have to remember, Hezbollah is not just a militant group; it's a political party. Mm-hmm. It's involved in charities. It's got a whole social network supporting it, and there are people who are functioning in other aspects of Hezbollah, and I don't know, maybe they knew somehow that these pagers only went to the military types. Maybe probably they don't care, they don't see a distinction, but we might argue that there is a distinction. It's a bit of a, it's not something that we're used to in the U.S. to have a political party that has a militia, at least not officially attached to it. I guess the Republican Party probably has a number of unofficial militias attached to it. But it's a bit of a strange circumstance for us. But there are what I think you could consider to be civilian parts of Hezbollah that may have also been targeted here.
The detail about them discovering that the sort of booby trapping had taken place and Israel just deciding to blow them up then is interesting, because when this first happened, I thought, well, they're preparing to completely bombard Lebanon. Does that inform like how you gauge the likelihood of another occupation of Lebanon, or like what are you expecting from Israel now that they've done this?
I mean, I think what they're doing is what you could have expected, which is to drastically escalate the provocation. What the Israelis want to happen here is they want Hezbollah. They want a plausible way for for the Biden administration, for the New York Times, for whatever constituencies really matter to the Israeli government, to be able to say, see, Hezbollah started the war. Like, it was a conflict. There was definitely something happening. I think there's an AP piece today. Like, it's hard to define what's going on. We just don't know. It's such a strange situation. What they want is to be able to plausibly say Hezbollah started the war, and then we went in and invaded southern Lebanon and cleared it out, only in self-defense. It was, wasn't an aggressive action on our part. We had to do it. So I think having blown what would have been a potential first strike weapon in a scenario like that, what you're seeing, which is a greatly increased tempo of airstrikes. Hundreds of people were killed just today on Monday. The claim, again, taking the Israelis' word for it, that there's some imminent massive rocket launch that Hezbollah is going to undertake, and all these rockets happen to be stored in homes and civilian residential buildings, and so that's what we have to bomb. Again, it's all, take our word for it. We definitely trust us, and I think that's the kind of thing you would expect to see in an attempt to capitalize, to force Hezbollah into a retaliation that they can then justify invading and making use of the fact that they've, again, taken out, in the strategic sense, taken out communications networks, taken out a number of operatives, but they can only capitalize on that if they get the right provocation from Hezbollah.
And, one final thing. Can they handle Lebanon, the West Bank, and Gaza? Like, with all the stuff with they're not having to pull, like, Orthodox troops in? Like, is this... I mean, I guess with American backing, maybe they can.
So, yeah, I mean, if the U.S. is there to shoot down rockets or shoot down drones and, step in and keep the Iranians out and that sort of thing, it certainly increases their chances. Now, the Israeli military, the last time they really tangled with Hezbollah was in 2006, and it didn't go well for them. So the question of, again, as I said earlier, the idea that they can pivot immediately from 11 months of dropping everything they have on Gaza to fighting Hezbollah is questionable, I think, given that background. Now, that said, there's no question that they've caught Hezbollah on a number of occasions here in compromising positions. The pager strike, certainly, or the pager and radio attack. These couple of times that they've carried out airstrikes in Beirut that have taken out senior level Hezbollah leaders. They tried another one on Monday. I don't think they succeeded, but they made another attempt on another senior figure. They've certainly done a fair amount here that you would say is not necessarily surprising, but certainly they've landed some major blows against Hezbollah. Now, whether that would translate if this does wind up in an invasion scenario, could they actually pull that off? I have strong doubts about that. Again, partly because of 2006, partly because I think a lot of their soldiers must be exhausted. Their capacities must be depleted. To invade southern Lebanon at this point, I think would be very difficult for them. But I wouldn't say they can't do it, but it would probably be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's been kind of busy and hard to keep up with everything that's been happening today. But I mean, how much of an opportunity do you think that there is to sort of walk back from the strikes that we've been seeing already? I mean, it really does feel, the United States announcing that they're going to sort of increase presence in the region. I mean, it really does feel like we're kind of at a brink for this conflict. Though, to be fair, we've had you on and other folks on over the past year where we've said similar things where it feels like, we are on the brink of this sort of, expanding outside of just Gaza. But I mean, what's your sense here?
I mean, the only way to step back from this is for the Israelis to step back from it, right? I mean, what worked, back in, was it April when there was the big exchange of fire between the Iranians and the Israelis, was that both sides kind of, fired off their barrages. They didn't do a lot of damage on either side, and they said, okay, we're going to stop for now. But it would have to be a mutual thing. I think Hezbollah has certainly appeared reluctant to let things get into go into that realm that I guess you could consider full-blown war. But that has to be reciprocated by the Israelis, or else they're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And eventually, I mean, I know, Hezbollah is stretching its red lines, I think, to the breaking point. Lebanon itself is barely functional as a state. So, I would think at some point, right? I mean, you would think after killing, I think the last count was 350 or more people in a single day. We don't know how many of them were Hezbollah and how many of them were civilians, but you would think after a day like that, the Lebanese government would be saying, what the hell are you doing? This is, this is an act of war. There is no real functional government in Lebanon, so we don't know where the line is there. Probably nowhere. But yeah, I mean, I don't see any evidence at this point that the Israelis are prepared to step back, and there's nothing certainly that the Biden administration is doing to force them to step back. So I don't know. I don't know if we're going to tip over into war because, again, there's not Hezbollah has been reluctant to go that far or take it, escalate it to that level. But we're certainly not going to see a de-escalation until the Israelis are prepared to de-escalate, or somebody is prepared to force them to de-escalate, and it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, you know, what is the advantage here for Israel, really? Because, you know, you have to, what you're talking about here is Hezbollah sort of moving the red lines. You also have the Iranian president saying that these attacks are a, quote, trap. You know, does Israel, like, what is a win for Israel here, right? Is it conflict, or is it even just this, I don't know, power projection? Or is it that they think that they're going to, as you were talking about earlier, be able to sever any support for maybe Hamas in the areas? That's sort of what the hope is that they're sort of flexing their muscle as a kind of threat to any forces or institutions that might be sort of funneling support into Hamas?
Yeah, I guess my question would be, what's the lose scenario for Israel at this point? Like, this seems like a no-lose situation for them, unless they finally go too far. And I would say, you know, that's only going to happen if they go ahead with an invasion of southern Lebanon. I mean, I'm not saying they would definitely, you know, come out on the wrong end of that, but it would certainly leave them vulnerable to a bad outcome. But short of that, like, what's the downside here? Netanyahu has the full support of the United States. He's protected from any major retaliation from Iran. They can handle, I think, you know, they're the aggressor with Hezbollah. So, I mean, clearly they're comfortable with where things are in that situation. You know, the outcome here is either Netanyahu gets what he wants and he gets Hezbollah to stand down and you know, sever ties with Hamas, or essentially sever its support for Hamas, and he gets to turn his attention back to whatever the end game there is, ethnic cleansing or you know, who knows at this point. You know, or we just keep doing this for the next, you know, whatever it is, 45 days, and he crosses his fingers and hopes that Donald Trump is elected and gets carte blanche. He gets carte blanche to do anything he wants, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, and in terms of annexations, you know, just all the goodies that would come along with the Donald Trump administration. What's from a purely self-interested rationale, what's been crazy to me watching the Biden administration's approach to this is they're dealing with somebody who is openly rooting for the other guy to win, right? I mean, he's openly rooting for the other guy to win, and he's doing what he can to make sure that happens, and you're providing him with the weapons and support he needs to do that. That is fundamentally just batshit to me. I don't get it. I don't understand why there isn't even a minimal self-defense mechanism for these people to step in and do something, you know, to take a different course. But that, you know, that's sort of the scenarios here. Either he gets the win in the next month and a half, or he doesn't, but he gets Donald Trump at the end of it, and that opens up all kinds of new possibilities for him. In the meantime, the longer he stays at war, the longer he avoids a reckoning for October 7th, the longer he avoids any political fallout that might lead to a snap election. Now, and in the meantime, his support is growing again. Right? There's, you know, he finally, after having a crater after October 7th, when you would have thought there would be sort of a rally around the flag thing, the fecklessness of his opposition and the, you know, the pressure from Hezbollah, the pressure from Iran has finally, I think, generated some improvement in his public support. So he's probably feeling pretty good that at this point, if he can just drag this out for a little bit longer, then he'll be in position to where he can win an election if that comes back, you know, regardless of October 7th, regardless of the fact that he was already pretty unpopular before that. He will have successfully kind of ridden out the crisis for him. You know, in the meantime, how many, you know, thousands of people have to die? Who can say they'll all be sacrificed on the altar of Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, I mean, what Joe Biden's brain is telling him. I mean, I almost don't like to engage in the is he sincere or not sort of thought experiment. But like Felix Biederman of Chapel put this way: if what we've seen for the past 6 months is Biden and states' earnest, legitimate attempts at a ceasefire, then this is the dumbest fucking administration of the last 80 years. And it kind of seems like the reason to actually think about maybe this is some sincere is that. If that's true, holy crap, we are led by morons.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, yeah, again, I don't know how people are still working for him. If you've got any modicum of sense, you know, and you're not baked into this, and your career isn't. I mean, you know, I understand why Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken are still working for him, but some of these other people, like if you're at a mid-level position here and you realize what's going on, like you're not going to fix it from the inside. Like it's just not. I don't want to make an appeal for people to quit because everybody's got to feed their families, and you know, there's no way around that. And I don't judge anybody, but like, what do you think you're doing? Like, what is it that you think at this point is going on? We had a conversation, Danny and I, American Prestige, with Bob Wright a few days ago, and it got into like who's really driving the ship, because of course Biden, who knows? And my argument was it has to be Biden still, because even if he's as compromised as he seems to be, I can't imagine anybody else in this White House. You know, they might not change the policy, but I think the imagery, the way this is played out, just the back and forth with Netanyahu and the embarrassment that he's heaped upon the U.S. president, I think probably most other people, even the Blinkens and Sullivans, who are institutionalists and sort of understand that the presidency should be kind of treated in an elevated way, to watch Biden debase himself like this, I think they would probably be alarmed at that if they were making calling the shots themselves. But I don't know. I just can't. I can't even begin to understand what anybody is thinking at this point.
Well, no. I mean, every kind of window that we have into the Biden administration really is something else. But talking about trying to figure out what somebody's role is here. Did you see what Leon Panetta said over the weekend?
Yes, I did. He called the pager attacks terrorism. Yeah.
I mean, what is going on there? Is that just somebody sort of being on the outside, being able to call balls and strikes?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's stunning for somebody like Leon Panetta, as steeped as he is in D.C. To say that was shocking to me. It was counterbalanced by Hillary Clinton telling everybody,
we're going to play that later.
If you support Palestine, you have no factual or historical understanding of anything. Which, this is a woman who wouldn't know a fact if it walked up in the street, slapped her in the face. So we're balancing, I guess, between those two poles. But yeah, Panetta's thing was really surprising to me when I saw it. I would never have, of all people, to say something like that. I would not have expected him to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, and in fairness, I think he was really focused on like the manner of the attack. But I think that's very notable. I mean, I think that
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he's right. I mean, this is an act of terror. It's terrorized the Lebanese populace. People have to look at their devices and think, is this thing going to blow up? Or they have to look at the guy standing next to them on the street and think, is this guy going to explode in the next 5 minutes? Like, I'm in line at the checkout counter. Is somebody in line going to blow up just by happenstance? And that's terrorism. I mean, that's terrorism. There's no way around that. You sort of expect to hear some rationale for it, and I guess and the rationale, it also, by the way, is a violation of international law. Booby trapping consumer products or things that civilians use is a violation of international law. And again, you get these tortured pretzel defenses. Well, international law doesn't anticipate that you're gonna know exactly which devices are used by the bad guys, and you're going to be able to do this and that, and there's a special carve out, I guess, for Israel, but it's just all bullshit. It's a war crime. It's terrorism.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, Derek, thank you so much for your time again. People, I mean, if you're not following the Foreign Exchange's newsletter or American Prestige, I mean, really fucking up. But we'll put the links for people in the comments.
That's right. You're really fucking up.
You know what I just found out? I mean, just, to add praise to American Prestige, phenomenal work there. I just found out I'm subscribed to it across 3 different accounts.
Well, by all means, multiple account holders are welcome.
Encouraged very much.
Pay us 2, 3 times, 4 times. Please do.
No, we really do appreciate all of y'all's work over there. So folks, definitely be subscribing it and keeping up with it.
We just switched platforms, actually. I guess I should mention
triple
this.
down.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
3 more for you,
subscribe
David.
3 more times. No, we were on Substack. We're now on Supporting Cast, which hosts a number of people, pretty heavy duty podcasts. I think NPR's on there, and Blowback, I think, does works through Supporting Cast. So there's a lot of like cool other shows on the network, and we're excited to be making the switch. Folks want to check it out, I can send you guys a link if you want to put it in the
We'll put a link right in the description for everybody.
And we're starting a new series which features Daniel Steinmetz Jenkins. It's sort of we're like producing an interview series that he's doing, so we're excited about that too. It should be debuting in the next couple of weeks.
Well, very nice. Derek Davison, at DW Davison on Twitter, and we'll put all those links for folks. Thanks so much again, man.
Thanks, guys.